Welcome to episode 106 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing director and screenwriter Craig Zahler. Craig recently wrote and directed Bone Tomahawk starring Kurt Russell. We talk about how he got his film made as well as how he got started in the business, so stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking us on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts, and then just look for episode number 106. I continually build out the SYS script library. Terry Phillips sent in a bunch of horror scripts, including Annabelle, Ouija, Valentine, Insidious, and Insidious 2. And I know what you did last summer. Thank you, Terry, for sending those in. It is very much appreciated. If you have a screenplay that you do not see listed in the script library, please do let me know. Send me an email with it. The SYS script library is completely free. We have over 1,000 scripts in the library, many hit movies and award winners and television shows. All the scripts are in PDF format, so you can download and read them on whatever device you use. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/library. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how you sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. Quick few words about what I'm working on. Same projects I'm basically pushing forward. I've been talking about both of these projects now for quite some time. I'm still continuing with the rewrites on my spoof comedy. I've got another draft basically done and ready to send off. I'll spend another couple of days, 2 or 3 days, just going through it and just trying to beef up the comedy, just more comedy bits. I think I mentioned this. The big note from the producers was they really want it just to be more Naked Gun-esque. So just more gags, more jokes per page. So the structure and the basic story I think is all laid out, but I'm just going through now and just really trying to, just anywhere I can interject a joke or a gag, I'm doing it. I've got my Kickstarter campaign basically all ready to go. Again, this is another thing I've been talking about for a while. I've probably been talking about this for 6 months. Time has finally arrived to push it out into the world and see what happens. This podcast episode is going to air on Monday, is going to first publish on Monday, January 11th, and then the Kickstarter campaign will go live a week later. So the Kickstarter campaign will go live on Monday, January 18th. So keep an eye out for that. I spent a good bit of time on the teaser trailer. That was probably by far the single biggest piece to this, just producing that, editing that, getting all the sound work done on that. And I've been talking about that throughout the podcast. But anyways, doing the teaser trailer was definitely a big piece of this. That's going to be on the Kickstarter campaign. I'm not going to release that early. I really want people to check out the whole Kickstarter page. So again, in 1 week, I'm going to launch that. I'm curious to see how people take the trailer. Definitely spend some time and energy on that. So hopefully people enjoy the trailer. It's actually a scene from the movie. It's just like a 1-minute scene from the movie is the teaser trailer. So we'll see how people like that. Anyway, wish me luck. And as I said, keep an eye out for my Kickstarter campaign next week. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing Craig Zahler. Here is the interview. Welcome, Craig, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me.
Yep, thanks for inviting me on. Looking forward to chatting.
So to start out, maybe you can just give us a quick overview of your career, kind of how you got started in the entertainment industry and eventually worked your way up and became a professional writer.
So I went to film school. I went to NYU, and there I studied animation and cinematography, where my focus is. I studied a little bit of writing. For the most part, I didn't get that much out of those courses, and that wasn't really my focus at the time. And I took the directing courses as well, and a couple of acting courses that lead to the directing courses, though I never had any interest in acting. And myself. And so after I got out of school, I was trying to push my career forward as a cinematographer and work on some independent features and shorts. Most of this stuff was shot on 16 or Super 16, occasionally 35 millimeter. But this is really before the digital age. This is like mid to late 90s that I'm talking about for the most part. And at the same time, I started writing these really bizarre theater pieces, inspired a little bit by Richard Foreman and Eugene Ionesco, like fairly, absurd stuff. So I was pushing all of this and doing music at the same time. And the thing with working as a cinematographer was I worked on movies that weren't completed or weren't good or both. And it wasn't really that satisfying for me. And there was a point, it was probably around the time Breaking the Waves came out, and I watched that movie and I didn't think it looked good, but I thought it was a great movie. And I just started to see that really more and more the most important thing with most of the movies that I liked was not how it looked, but was really the content of the script and then performances delivering it at that level or above. And so I started focusing more and more on writing. I had a horror screenplay that I'd actually sort of written in college that was called Incident at Sam's Asylum. And then I wrote a bunch of other things, like a raunchy Shakespearean comedy called Eulogy for a Juggling Monkey, all over the place, different genres. An experimental horror piece in the style of like Persona and Lost Highway, and this is called Twist and Spine of the Midnight Collaborator. So really writing across all genres. I was, at this time, my day job was as a catering chef. And a really good friend of mine who I'd known since childhood and went to college with as well, named Graham Winnick. He was out in Los Angeles at this time and passed along a couple of my screenplays, Incident at Sam's Asylum and Narrow Caves, to Vertigo, whose business was largely taking Japanese movies and turning them into American movies like Ring, Grudge, that sort of stuff. So I got in with those guys, in particular Sonny Malley and Doug Davison, and developed stuff with them, and eventually got to a point where I thought a piece was going to go forward in Hollywood. At the time, this is like probably 2003, 2004. I was also working on a massive fantasy novel, and nothing went anywhere. So I, just continued to work on music, and I worked on, and I finished this massive fantasy novel. And then the Vertigo guys again had interest in one of those pieces called The Narrow Caves, showed it to an agent they worked with. His name is Julian Twan. He signed me. He's at UTA. He's a United Talent Agency. He's a senior partner there. And it's, the first thing he said to me after reading that script was, "You really like H.P. Lovecraft, don't you?" So first, I was glad that he recognized that, and even knew who that was. And second, he and I had a really good conversation. And so it wasn't that long after that I wrote a script called The Brigand of Rallagorge, which went around, got me a 3-picture deal at Warner Brothers, and was the top script on the blacklist for that year, maybe 2007, maybe 2006. And between then and Bone Tomahawk, I sold or had optioned about 20 scripts. At this point, I think I'm up to 23 or 24, and I've seen none of them made in Hollywood. So very, very frustrating for me. And a lot of what led to me doing Bone Tomahawk. But it's like, I don't know actually how many people are having that many different pieces sold, and some of these pieces I've sold or had optioned multiple times. Brigand of Rallagorge, like maybe 4 or 5 times that thing was optioned until it was finally sold. So, like, I learned that you could make a fair amount of money and have a lot of business in that industry and have nothing turn into an actual movie, and which is frustrating. Less frustrating for me because I make albums and those things come out, and I write novels and those are published. So I get creative satisfaction in music and in publishing, but not really in movies until now. that had just been like, well, I'm generating income, and every time I need to put on the blinders and hope that this is the one that's going to get made. And still that opportunity exists for these pieces, but it's pretty tough to have that many pieces go, and the amount of different celebrity actor directors who've been involved with these pieces to then abandon them. It's a tough industry.
Yeah, to say the least. That's a good summation. So let me just go back on a couple things you just said briefly. You mentioned these first jobs right out of film school. You're working as a cinematographer. People are always asking me kind of how can you break in at the bottom, the entry level. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about how you got those very, very, very first jobs. Were they connections through film school? Did you just send your resume randomly into places? How did you kind of get those first, very, very first jobs in the business?
It was people I met in film school, and then them recommending me to other people. Like at that time, we're talking 1996. There wasn't like a place from a website for me to put up and have my demo reel. And I was in a fortunate position as a cinematographer in 96, 97. I graduated college in 95. I was in a fortunate position to have a reel. I got out of school and I tried to shoot as much stuff as I could then as a DP. And so I got out of film school and I already had a cinematographer's reel. And I could show someone what I was able to do with very little money because, certainly you're shooting a 30-minute student film is not like, I'm the cinematographer, but I'm probably also learning setting up the lights or sharing some of these duties. And so that was how I got my jobs. Were for the most part recommendations. Someone knew somebody, and then it starts to get further and further away from film school people. You're on a set, you're on a set somewhere and doing a good job, and then someone on that set sees you and then recommends you for another job. So that's how a fair amount of my stuff happened. Were those sort of recommendations because I had my reel, which was a VHS video cassette that I would give to people who were interested in taking a look at it, but not really some broad way to advertise. And this is why I had, while I was pursuing the career as a cinematographer and briefly as an animator, I always had day jobs. Like I was a graphic designer for a little while. But for most of that time, I was chef at a catering company, doing events. And so my ground up was I came out of film school with material that was good enough to get me hired on low budget movies, and then shoot low budget movies, and then get material from those that was good enough to get me other material like get me other jobs like the ones I had done.
Yeah. So let me just ask you briefly, too. You mentioned you got this 3-picture deal. Whenever I talk to writers about these types of deals, they always sort of vary greatly about what exactly those mean. Maybe you can describe what a 3-picture deal looked like for you.
What the 3-picture deal was?
Yeah. Maybe you can just describe sort of the ins and outs of that and what exactly that means.
Mine was tricky and didn't really go according to plan. I think it became apparent early on to almost everybody who worked with me that I was very evasive and didn't think most of the stuff coming out of Hollywood was very good, and really wanted to get my stuff my way and not at any cost, because certainly that's always there in terms of the idea of playing ball to get your movies made. In terms of this deal, it was rigging the router boards optioned by Warner Brothers. Then I was on board to write a movie where there was a famous actor was involved, like top of the A-list with the project, and I was hired to write that movie. And there was a producer involved, and we had it. And then there was a third pair that was just an original script of mine. So that third piece, the original script, I had originally spoken to Warner Bros. Because, you know, a lot of these people want properties. And of the 45 scripts, 44 scripts I've written total, I think 3 of them are not original ideas to me, maybe 4. Like, I'm definitely an originals guy and not a property guy. I always have about 30 ideas I could write depending on what I want to pursue, be it a book or a television show or a movie. But people like properties in Hollywood, and certainly if I'm mostly doing originals, doing a property here and there that has a better chance of getting made, I understand that, especially if it's not something where I feel like I'm living up to, like, you know, I've had people discuss the idea of remaking Wages of Fear, which was already remade, or Deliverance and stuff like these, like, those movies are already great and already there. Go do something new. Yeah. And but if it's a case of like a generally known property, like a superhero kind of thing, that's a different thing. So at the time, I'm a huge anime fan and have been watching it since I was buying video cassettes out of the back of some dude's trunk. I grew up in Miami, and he'd like drive over to my house with all these video cassettes. Seems pretty shady looking back on it. And I'd like, you know, save up my allowance and get these anime movies, and they were not translated. But I'm a huge animation fan, and that was the way I could watch them and memorize a fair amount of Japanese, which, you know, I couldn't translate for you. But amongst these was a property called Golgo 13, and directed by Osamu Dezaki, who's to this day one of my favorite directors. And that was a property that I could see, like, there's a way to do this. This guy is half Japanese, you know, half Caucasian, and there's a way to do this well. And so I was trying to get that going. I think most people who've dealt with getting the rights out of Japan, particularly longevous property like Golgo 13, can tell you, like, what a nightmare it is. So Warner Brothers, as you said, it is going to be really, really complicated. Can you just do your own original Hitman thing? That isn't this. And so I did, and it was a piece called Bullet Benedictions, and that was the second part of the deal. The third part of the deal, the script that I mentioned where there was the A-list actor involved, became a process of so many meetings and discussions about it, I just walked away from it. And I think people were kind of shocked that I'm walking away from a project with top of the A-list star, but it never went. Like, it's not like this movie happened and there was another writer involved. But, like, there's an instinct of, like, let me begin and let me do it. And if you want to have talks about it and take trips and, you know, and discuss this piece forever, you want a process that I am not open to. But that's not what I do. Like, I decide to write a script, and 30 days later it's written. And if everyone wants to sit around and brainstorm, I can leave that room and leave that project. It's not my process. I'm sure there are a host of great things that have been written with a bunch of people sitting around discussing what should be written. It's just not how I function. So I walked away from that third part of that deal. But there wasn't really bad blood. Well, there probably was with certain people involved, but not with Warner Brothers and myself, because I later sold them Robotech, one of the aforementioned handful of non-original pieces I did, which I was taking around with Tobey Maguire attached. And then I sold them Mean Business on North Ganson Street, and I sold them a script called Raw Knuckles, which is one of my couple favorite scripts ever. It's a Prohibition-era gangster piece. And so I've had a lot of business there, but the 3-picture deal turned into really a 2-picture deal because I walked away from the one, and then that second picture, never really went anywhere.
Yeah. Let's talk about Bone Tomahawk for a minute, starring Kurt Russell. That's your latest film. You wrote and directed it. Maybe to start out, you can just give us a quick log line for the film so people can kind of figure out what it's all about.
It's the story of a group of people who live in a town called Bright Hope on the western frontier, and there are still some wild things out in that area, and a group of people are kidnapped from the town, and a husband of one of the kidnapped people and a group of other people, including the sheriff, go out after them.
Okay.
I would say that's all that I'd like to say prior to someone seeing the movie.
Sure, sure. Okay, so maybe you can tell us, where did this idea come from? Was this an original idea?
Yeah, it's an original idea. The genesis of the piece was I was watching a lot of low budget, like micro budget horror stuff at the end of. Well, I watched a lot of it for many years, but at the end of 2011, around there, I was really digging in deep with micro budget horror stuff, and this is like the movies of Brian Pollin, like Bone Sickness and Fetus, the toe tag movies, the plot digger movies, all this sort of stuff. And I decided to write one of those. I'd sold, I think at that point, 20 different pieces I'd sold or had optioned. A bunch of TV pilots, a bunch of different scripts, some commission, but mostly specs or my pitches. And I just wanted to see something made, because all that stuff was financially fulfilling, but creatively not fulfilling, to have all these blueprints for unmade movies. And so I was going to do this micro-budget horror movie, and I talked to my team, Julian Swan, who I'd mentioned before, my agent, and then Dallas Saunier, who's my manager, the producer of Tomahawk. And they suggested, how about, I do a Western, because that was, at that time, I already had 2 Western novels that were published and 2 Western scripts that were sold, and it's frankly something I think I'm better at doing than horror. Most of my pieces have horror elements in them. My crime pieces, my science fiction pieces, and my Westerns go to the, plumb the depths of depravity or violence at certain spots, so much so that horror will always come up in descriptions of my work, or generally will come up in descriptions of my work, as will comedy, because I think there should usually be a humor component. But that's where it came from, was that conversation. And at the time, I had my second Western book, which is my favorite of all of my Westerns, is a book called Race of the Broken Land. And that thing is really, really violent, far more so than No Tomahawk, but huge in scale. Like, there's no way to do that thing for anything other than a large sum of money. The size of the battle sequences, it's huge. And so I knew Dallas had suggested that I adapt that book. And I said, that book could be a great limited series, or like 3.5-hour movie that costs probably a minimum of $50 million. But I don't want to take something that is, let's say, roughly 90,000 words, and turn it into a script which on the larger side will be 30,000 words. I don't want to cut out 2/3 of this. Let me write an original Western that, like Race of the Broken Land, would be a rescue mission Western, and do something that fits the parameters of a low budget Western. And that's how Bone Tomahawk came about. I knew I was going to play up the horror aspects in terms of the antagonist, and I wanted to show something new that people hadn't ever seen before in a Western, and that's the genesis of the antagonist of this movie, the troglodytes. But the inception of this was, let me write something that I can get the financing for and make. And, once we started getting all these actors on board, then it really started to become real.
Yeah. And let's talk about that just briefly for a minute. How did you guys go about getting the financing for this?
Getting the cast?
Getting the financing for this film.
Oh, the financing. The financing, so the reality is, Dallas Saunier, my manager, friend, and the producer of this movie, wrote a check for half of it. The rest was foreign interest. There was not a single company in all the companies that put out all the wonderful American movies you see that gave us $1 for this. And that was when we had this cast on board, Kurt Russell and Richard Jenkins being mainstays, and some of the other people changing over time. But the financing for this was pretty astonishing. But I can take some credit, in terms of the difficulty there. because I wasn't interested in cutting down the script, and I wasn't interested in just putting in some young hunk, or, who I didn't think could act. And I wasn't really interested in it being anything other than what I originally saw it as. So, we got money from, England and, Germany and France and all these places. But the companies in the United States wanted creative say. And I remember the last company that was interested in this that we dealt with, and they talked about giving us some financing. They gave a list of things that they would need to control, like casting, hiring of the cinematographer, all this sort of stuff. And we'd already been through the process a couple times with a couple of other different companies. And it was a list of things where I wouldn't agree to a single one of them. And so that's how it happened. And Dallas Sonnier gets there's one person who risked more and worked harder on this movie than I did, and it's that guy. And so there was no normal way of getting a movie like this made, because no one is letting, some of the scenes of violence, everyone said had to go. All of the time I take with all those characters and all that space, everyone said this stuff had to go. In so many ways, this goes against all of the conventional wisdom of how to make a commercial movie. I could go in and spend 10 hours in an editing room tomorrow and turn it into a more commercial movie. It's very obvious how to do it. I had no interest in making that movie. And to me, the version of the movie that I thought would be the best, that I wanted to make, is the one that I personally like the most. And I want people to like it, but I'm not making creative decisions so that more people will like it. Yes, if in the first 45 minutes I cut out 20 minutes, yes, if I put a lot more music in there, yes, if I made some of this stuff more upbeat, yes, if I put in a lot of, if I made it cuttier and put in lots of close-ups, there are lots of ways to make it more normal. But it was a long struggle getting there, and I wanted to make something different. That's the whole reason I'm doing this. I'm not trying to make a movie you've seen before. So, so the financing was, they sold different packages of this movie again and again and again. And unfortunately, we had packages that included actors who could no longer do the movie. And by that last time, we just had a package that was Kurt Russell in this script. And, and our foreign seller went around and took it to markets, and we saw how much money was there. And that was about half of the budget of the movie. And then Dallas paid for the rest out of pocket. So that's, there isn't really any advice there for people, because I was just very fortunate to have someone who believed in the project enough to finance it that way, and not say you've really got to change all this stuff that people say you've got to change.
Let's talk about your novels. We're going to wrap up here in the next couple of minutes. Let's talk about your novels just for a second. How can people find those and potentially buy those if they want to check out more of what you've written?
Three of the 4 books are readily available everywhere, Amazon, eBay. The first of my published novels is a Western called The Congregation of Jackals, and that was critically really well received. I got a couple awards nominations. That thing is out of print, so I'm looking for another publisher to reprint it, because it's in general the copies of that are selling for too much money, like $100 or more, because it was sold out. So that one is trickier to get. The other 3 novels, there's the Western called Race to the Broken Land, and that one most relates to Bone Tomahawk in terms of it's a rescue mission Western, though really none of the characters or scenes are the same, and it is just a much larger experience. So that's the first one I would recommend to people who enjoy Bone Tomahawk to check out. And unlike a movie where there are many, many constraints that you're dealing with all the time, like Race to the Broken Land, that thing is published and it's 100% what I wanted it to be. There are no compromises there at all. There's no we're running out of daylight, or these horses won't go where we want them to, or we don't have enough money to do this. So that is a very clear, that's a very clearly presented version of a Western, the way I want to do it. And then there is Corpus Christi Incorporated, which is a weird science fiction piece a fair amount of humor, probably would appeal to Philip K. Dick fans. And then there's some philosophical stuff that I would certainly push towards the Ted Chiang and Greg Egan reader. And then the other novel that is out there is Mean Business on North Ganson Street, which is a crime piece, which I'm developing right now as a TV show. And we'll see where that lands. And that thing probably has the best dialogue of anything I've written. So I've certainly been complimented a bunch on the dialogue on the Tomahawk, which is very nice to hear. So if that aspect really appealed to you, I was going to Mean Business on North Ganson Street.
Perfect. How can people see Bone Tomahawk? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be like?
Bone Tomahawk is, available through Amazon and iTunes and all that stuff. But the Blu-ray and DVD will be coming out by the end of the year. You can pre-order it now. There's some cool extras on there. Nice thing I was together with a large chunk of the cast talking about the movie after the premiere. Fantastic fest. And then a little making of, with some behind the scenes stuff and some talking heads with, Richard Jenkins, Kurt Russell, and Matthew Fox, Patrick Wilson. So that'll be out there soon, and it's a fantastic way to tell someone I love you is in this movie with this hideous violence. And
perfect.
So that's out there, and you can pre-order it now, and it'll be out there in a couple of weeks.
Okay, perfect. Well, Craig, I appreciate your coming on talking with me. This was an interesting interview. I learned a lot, and I wish you luck with the film.
Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate the support, and good luck to you.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, characters, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We provide an analysis on feature films and television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your projects, this is a great way to do it. We will also write a logline and synopsis for you. You can add this service to the analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. So if you're having trouble writing a logline and synopsis, you can let one of our professional readers do it for you. As a bonus, if your script gets a recommend from a reader, you get a free email or fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same blast service I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service I sell on the website. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. In the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Lawrence Roke, who directed and co-wrote the new feature film Diablo starring Scott Eastwood. This is another Western, and again, we talked through his early career and then talked through this recent production of Diablo, so keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview. Hopefully, if you listen to this podcast regularly, it wasn't a surprise when Craig said he had sold or optioned 23 screenplays, but none of them actually got produced. This is a very, very common thing, and I think it's something that people who are new to the industry or trying to break into the industry don't fully understand, is that there's people out there who have full careers, screenwriting careers, and literally have no produced credits. So it's not that uncommon for this, what Craig is talking about, to happen. I actually ran into something I would say similar early on in my career, sort of the opposite, but it led me down this path that was somewhat difficult. It was the first screenplay that I ever optioned actually ended up getting produced. Me and my writing partner, we optioned it. 6 months later, they got funding and they produced this film. And I just thought at that point I was young enough and naive enough to think that that's kind of how it went. I mean, sure, I guess I knew that not every option turns into a produced feature film, but it seemed pretty routine for these guys that we had optioned it to. We optioned it. They paid us a little money. 6 months later, they bought the script. They went into production, and that was that. And in the meantime, I was optioning a bunch of other scripts. So I thought, gee, this is going to be easy. Screenwriting is going to be easy because I was optioning scripts. I'm still to this day optioning scripts. But as time went on, I realized, much like Craig, is that for every produced credit, you're going to have, a half dozen, maybe a dozen. In Craig's case, 23, 24, almost 24 options or sales before you actually get a produced credit. So you really want to keep that in mind. And I get a lot of emails from people, they've just optioned their first script, and I totally get it. It's exciting and it's fun, and it's a real career highlight. So I don't want to detract from that. And I felt the same way when me and my buddy optioned our first script. It was really exciting, and we thought we were off to the races. Unfortunately, you may not, but you might be, but you may not be off to the races. And it's important to really keep your head down and continue to work, continue to write new material, especially if the movie does get produced and gets a little bit of good buzz. You're going to want to have a bunch of other scripts ready to go. If you start to meet people, if people start to contact you, you really want to have 2, 3, 4, probably 5, 6 really solid scripts that you can start to send out, and be ready for that. I actually, after, as I mentioned, my own scenario with my first script, right after that script was produced, again, I was still naive enough to think that I was off to the races and things were all going to be downhill from then on. I actually went at that point, this was, the mid to late 90s, I went and got the WGA list of signatory agencies, and I think it's like 300 or something. It's a good number of agencies that are on this list. And I sent in the back, again, this was the late 90s, it was really before email was ubiquitous, and I just got this list, and I sent a hard letter, like a physical letter through the mail, to every single company. And I think it was, as I said, around 300. And I think I only got a handful of people requesting the script. So like we're saying less than like 5. I think I had 3, 4, maybe 5 of those 300 agencies request my script. And this was after I had a produced credit. I only got a handful of people, and I had a bunch of other scripts ready to go. I was pitching some of my new material, and probably only got 3 or 4, maybe 5 people amongst those 300 agencies to read the script, and none of them liked the scripts that I was sending out. So I actually did not get an agent at that point. It took me several years later before I actually had my first agent or manager. So keep that in mind. Just once you option that first script, that's great, and it's a good first step, but definitely realize you've got a lot more work to do, and keep writing and keep marketing. Keep trying to meet new people. Keep trying to find new producers and option your scripts to other people. That's what's really going to get the job done. I've been talking to several other people. Just this Bone Tomahawk, the movie that Craig mentioned, or the movie that Craig wrote and directed, Bone Tomahawk. It's come up in conversations a couple of times, just with other producers, other writers that I've talked to, and just completely independent, without me saying, oh, I interviewed this guy. And I have actually, this is one of the few movies I have not seen yet. Even though I interviewed Craig, I have not actually seen the movie. But people that I've been talking to have been saying it's a really good movie. So definitely check it out, especially if you like Westerns. I think you probably would enjoy this. But other people have been telling me this is a really good movie. So I think Craig is someone to watch. Just keep him on your radar and kind of see where his career goes. Also, I talk, and this is probably the single biggest lesson from today's interview. I talk with someone like Craig, and I do interviews quite often with guys like him that worked up in the industry. And after talking to him, it really occurs to me, and I get so many emails from people kind of looking for this magic bullet or secret sauce. And then you listen to an interview like I just did with Craig, and it just kind of occurs to me that, the secret, this so-called secret sauce, I mean, the secret is that there is no real secret. listen to what Craig did. There was no magic moment. I mean, he got out of college and just started working as a cinematographer on super low budget indie films, and they were terrible. And he just said it was not that satisfying. But, that kind of got the ball rolling. Very, very little, but slowly he was able to network. He started to realize his interests lay in writing, so he started to write. He had some connections in the industry, and slowly things have snowballed for him. It's taken, he mentioned early 2000s or something was when he started working on these films, these low-budget independent films out of college. So, it's taken him, 15 years or something to get to the point where he's at. And, a lot of people don't necessarily want to hear that. They want to hear, well, what's the secret sauce? I just need access to this one guy. And I get these emails all the time, hey, do you know such and such an actor? Do you know Martin Scorsese? I know this script would be perfect for him. And it may happen like that occasionally. Maybe you do hear those extraordinary stories, but listen to this podcast week after week. Most of the people that come on to this podcast have a story similar to Craig. There's no magic moment. They didn't just stumble into a bathroom in New York City and saddle up next to Martin Scorsese and pitch him the script, and the next thing they're off and running. Most of the stories that come on this podcast are like this. It's one slow step at a time to eventually work your way up. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.